We are starting on the top of page 13 of The Giver. He listened politely, though not very attentively, while his father took his turn, describing a feeling of worry that he had had the day at work. A concern about one of the new children who wasn't doing well. Jonas's father's title was nurturer. He and the other nurturers were responsible for all the physical and emotional needs of every new child during its earliest life. It was a very important job, Jonas knew, but it wasn't one that interested him much. What gender is it? Lily asked. Male, Father said. He's a sweet little male with a lovely disposition, but he isn't growing as fast as he should, and he doesn't sleep soundly. We have him in an extra care section for supplementary nurturing, but the committee's beginning to talk about releasing him. Oh no, Mother murmured sympathetically. I know how sad that must make you feel. Jonas and Lily both nodded sympathetically as well. Release of new children was always sad because they hadn't had a chance to enjoy life within the community yet, and they hadn't done anything wrong. There was only 2 occasions of release which were not punishment. Release of the elderly, which was a time of celebration for life, well and fully lived, and release of a new child, which was always brought on a sense of what could we have done. This was especially troubling for nurturers like Father, who had felt like they had failed somehow, but it happened very rarely. Well, Father said, I'm going to keep trying. I may ask the committee for permission to bring him here at night, if you don't mind. You know what the night crew nurturers are like. I think this little guy just needs something extra. Of course, Mother said, and Jonas and Lily nodded. They had heard Father complain about the night crew before. It was a lesser job, night crew nurturing, assigned to those who lacked the interest or skills or insight for the more vital jobs of the daytime hours. Most of the people on the night crew had not even been given spouses because they lacked, somehow, the essential capacity to connect with others, which was required for the creation of a family unit. Maybe we could even keep him, Lily suggested sweetly, trying to look innocent. The look was fake. Jonas knew. They all knew. Lily, Mother reminded her, smiling, you know the rules. 2 children, 1 male, 1 female to each family unit. It was written very, very clearly in the rules. Lily giggled. Well, she said, I thought maybe just this once. Next, Mother, who had a prominent position at the Department of Justice, talked about her feelings. Today, a repeat offender had been brought before her, someone who had broken the rules before, someone who she hoped had been adequately and fairly punished, and who had been restored to his place at his job, his home, and his family unit. To see him brought before her a second time caused an overwhelming feeling of frustration and anger, and even guilt, that she hadn't made a difference for his life. I feel frightened too for him, she confessed. You know that there's no third chance. The rules say that if there's a third transgression, he simply has to be released. Jonas shivered. He knew what happened. There was even a boy in his group of 11s whose father had been released years before. No one ever mentioned it. The disgrace was unspeakable. It was hard to imagine. Lily stood up and went to her mother. She stroked her mother's arm. For his place at the table, Father reached over. From his place at the table, Father reached over and took her hand. Jonas reached for the other. One by one, they comforted her. Soon she smiled, thanked them, and murmured that she felt soothed. The ritual continued. Jonas, Father asked, your last tonight. Jonas sighed, but this evening, he almost would have preferred to keep his feelings hidden. But it was, of course, against the rules. I'm feeling apprehensive, he confessed, glad that the appropriate descriptive word had finally come to him. Why is that, son? His father looked concerned. I know that there's nothing to worry about, Jonas explained, and that every adult has been through it. I know you have, Father, and you too, Mother, but it's the ceremony that I'm apprehensive about. It's almost December. Lily looked up, her eyes wide. The ceremony of 12s, she whispered in an awed voice. Even the smallest children, Lily's age and younger, knew that it lay in the future of each of them. I'm glad you told us your feelings, Father said. Lily, Mother said, beckoning to the little girl, go on now and get into your night clothes. Father and I are going to stay here and talk to Jonas for a while. Lily sighed, but obediently she got down from her chair. Privately, she asked. Mother nodded. Yes, she said. This talk will be private one with Jonas. Jonas watched as his father poured a fresh cup of coffee. He waited. You know, his father finally said, Every December was exciting to me when I was young, and it has been for you and Lily too, I'm sure. Each December brings such changes. Jonas nodded. He could remember the Decembers back to when he had become, well, probably a 4. The earlier ones were lost to him, but he observed them each year and remembered Lily's earliest Decembers. He remembered when his family received Lily and the day she was named, the day that she had become a 1. The ceremony for the ones was always noisy and fun. Each December, all the new children born in the previous year turned 1. One at a time, there were always 50 in each year's group. If none had been released, they had been brought to the stage by the nurturers who had cared for them since birth. Some were already walking, wobbling on their unsteady legs. Others were no more than a few days old, wrapped in blankets held by their nurturers. I enjoy the naming, Jonas said. His mother agreed, smiling. This year, we got Lily. Or the year we got Lily, we knew, of course, that we'd receive our female because we'd made our application and had been approved. But I'd been wondering and wondering about what her name would be. I could have sneaked a look at the list prior to the ceremony, Father confided. The committee always makes the list in advance, and it's right there in the office at the nurturing center. As a matter of fact, he went on, I feel a little guilty about this, but I did go in this afternoon to look and see this year's naming list had been made. It was right there in the office, and I looked up number 36. That's the little guy I've been concerned about, because it occurred to me that it might enhance his nurturing if I could call him by a name, just privately, of course, when no one else was around. Did you find it? Jonas asked. He was fascinated. It didn't seem a terribly important rule, but the fact that his father had broken a rule at all awed him. He glanced at his mother, the one responsible for adherence to the rules, and he was relieved that she was smiling. His father nodded. His name, if he makes it to the naming without being released, of course, is going to be Gabriel. So I whispered that to him when I feed him every 4 hours and during exercise and playtime, if no one can hear me. I call him Gabe, actually, he said and grinned. Gabe, Jonas tried it out. A good name, he decided. Though Jonas had become a 5 the year that he acquired Lily and learned her name, he remembered the excitement, the conversations at home wondering about her, how she would look, who she would be, how she would fit into the established family unit. He remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side that year instead of with the nurturer, since it was the year that he would be given a new child of his own. He remembered his mother taking the new child, his sister, into her arms while the document was read to the assembled family units. New child, 23, the namer had read, Lily. He remembered his father's look of delight and that his father had whispered, she's one of my favorites. I was hoping for her to be the one. The crowd had clapped and Jonas had grinned. He liked his sister's name. Lily, barely awake, had waved her small fist, and then they stepped down to make room for the next family unit. When I was 11, his father said now, as you are, Jonas, I was very impatient waiting for the ceremony of 12. It's a long 2 days. I remember that I enjoyed the ones, as I always do, but that I didn't pay much attention to their ceremonies except for my sister's. She became a 9 that year, and she got her bicycle. I'd been teaching her to ride mine, even though technically I wasn't supposed to. Jonas laughed. It was one of the few rules that was not taken very seriously and was almost always broken. The children all received their bicycles at 9. They were not allowed to ride bicycles before then, but almost always the older brothers and sisters had secretly taught the younger ones. Jonas had been thinking already about teaching Lily. There was talk about changing the rule and giving the bicycles at an earlier age. A committee was studying the idea. When something went to committee for study, it was the people always joked about it. They said that the committee members would become elders by the time the rule change was made. Rules were very hard to change. Sometimes it was very important rules, unlike the ones governing the age for bicycles. It would have to go eventually to the receiver for a decision. The receiver was the most important elder. Jonas had never even seen him that he knew of. Someone in a position of such importance lived and worked alone. But the committee would never bother the receiver with a question about bicycles. They would simply fret and argue about it themselves for years until the citizens forgot that it had ever gone to them for study. His father continued, "So I watched and cheered when my sister Katya had become a 9 and removed her hair ribbons and got her bicycle." Father went on, "Then I didn't pay much attention to the 10s and 11s, and finally, at the end of the second day, which seemed to go on forever, it was my turn. It was the ceremony of 12. Jonas shivered. He pictured his father, who must have been a shy, quiet boy, for he is a shy and quiet man, seated with his group, waiting to be called to the stage. The ceremony of 12s was the last of the ceremonies, the most important. I remembered how proud my parents looked, and my sister too. Even though she wanted to be out riding the bicycle publicly, she stopped fidgeting and was very still and attentive when my turn came. But to be honest, Jonas," his father said, "for me, there was not the element of suspense that there is with your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain of what my assignment was going to be." We are going to stop there, and we are at like right around the top. I believe it's the third paragraph on page 19. Oh, no. Page 20. Third paragraph on page 20.